Imagine being the ruler of Egypt, a kingdom so old that entire civilizations had risen and fallen during its lifetime. Your face appears on coins. Foreign rulers seek your favor, one of the richest kingdoms in the Mediterranean. Then, at the age of 39, you lock yourself inside a tomb. Outside, Alexandria is in chaos. The war is over. The fleet that was supposed to protect your kingdom has been destroyed, your supporters are abandoning you, and the future you spent years building has collapsed in a matter of weeks. Now Rome is coming. A few days later, Cleopatra is dead. The details are unclear. Ancient writers tell different versions of the story. Some claimed she used a venomous snake. Others weren't so sure. More than 2,000 years later, nobody knows exactly what happened inside that tomb. What happened outside is easier to explain. Egypt became a Roman province. The line of pharaohs ended, and a civilization that had existed for more than 3,000 years disappeared into history. Cleopatra is usually remembered as the last pharaoh. That title makes it sound as though she was born at the very end. She wasn't. When Cleopatra entered the world, Egypt was still wealthy. Its ships crossed the Mediterranean. Its markets attracted merchants from distant kingdoms. Alexandria remained one of the great cities of the ancient world. Nothing about it looked temporary, but power has a way of shifting quietly. And while Egypt enjoyed the wealth built by generations of rulers, Rome was becoming the dominant force in the Mediterranean. Every year, its influence grew. Every year, more kingdoms found themselves forced to pay attention to Roman politics, Roman armies, and Roman ambitions. Egypt was no different. Long before Cleopatra became queen, Rome had already become a fact of life. The decisions made there increasingly shaped what happened here. Cleopatra didn't create that reality. She was born into it. But before Rome became her greatest problem, she had to survive the people closest to her. Her own family. When her father died, Cleopatra was expected to share power with her younger brother. The arrangement quickly unraveled. The royal court divided into competing factions, advisors maneuvered for influence, and eventually Cleopatra found herself on the losing side. By her early 20s, she was no longer ruling Egypt. She wasn't even living there. Driven from Alexandria and cut off from the throne, Cleopatra watched from exile as others took control of the kingdom she believed was hers. Most rulers never recover from that. Cleopatra didn't have much choice. If she failed, her story would end there. Fortunately for her, events far beyond Egypt were already in motion. A civil war was tearing apart the Roman Republic, and one of the men at the center of that war was on his way to Alexandria. His name was Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar didn't come to Egypt for Cleopatra. He came for a man he wanted dead. A civil war had cracked Rome in half, and Caesar was chasing his rival, Pompey, across the Mediterranean. Pompey ran. He made it to Egypt, and he never got the chance to ask for help. The moment he stepped ashore, he was killed. The men running Egypt thought they were doing Caesar a favor. They weren't. They handed him a crisis instead. Caesar arrived in Alexandria expecting a clean resolution. What he found was a country at war with itself. And at the center of it, a 21-year-old queen who had already lost her throne. Her name was Cleopatra. She was living in exile. She needed her kingdom back. Caesar needed order, and neither of them could get what they wanted alone. There was one problem. Caesar was inside Alexandria. Cleopatra wasn't. The city was controlled by her enemies, and if anyone recognized her, it was over before it started. According to the most famous account, Cleopatra had herself smuggled into the palace in the middle of the night. Ancient writers later disagreed on the details. Nobody knows what was said when they finally met, but the outcome speaks for itself. Cleopatra walked into that palace as a fugitive. She left with Caesar's support, and in the world of ancient politics, the right man's attention could be worth more than an army. The gamble worked. Alexandria became a battlefield. Soldiers moved through the streets. For months, no one knew how it would end. Then the balance shifted. Cleopatra's rivals were defeated. Her brother drowned trying to escape, and the woman who had been driven out of Egypt came back, this time with Rome standing at her back. Ancient writers spent centuries trying to explain Cleopatra's hold over powerful men. Whatever the reason, Caesar clearly saw something others missed. The alliance between them stopped being purely political. They had a son together, and for a while, just a while, it looked like Cleopatra had done the impossible. She had lost her kingdom, won it back, and secured the backing of the most powerful man alive. But her future had one fatal weakness. It depended entirely on Julius Caesar, and powerful men in Rome had a habit of making enemies they couldn't see coming. In 44 BC, a group of senators surrounded Caesar during a meeting. By the time it was over, the man who helped Cleopatra reclaim Egypt was dead on the floor of the Senate. News spread fast across the Mediterranean. For Rome, it was the start of another civil war. For Cleopatra, a warning. The kingdom she had just fought to keep was once again tied to a power struggle she couldn't control. And soon, another Roman would enter her life, one who would change everything. His name was Mark Antony. Mark Antony already knew who Cleopatra was. He'd served under Julius Caesar and watched the Egyptian situation unfold from a distance. Now Caesar was dead, Rome was fracturing again, and Cleopatra was once more caught in the middle. After the assassination, the scramble for power began. Antony moved fast. He commanded armies, held vast territories, and for a time stood as the most powerful man in the Roman world. But Rome was still divided, and the men fighting over it were not finished. Cleopatra understood what that meant. If Egypt was going to survive, she couldn't afford to ignore him. They met in 41 BC. Antony summoned her to answer for Egypt's failure to support Rome in its latest conflicts. Officially, it was political. In reality, Antony wanted to see the Queen of Egypt for himself. Cleopatra understood the moment. She arrived by ship. Silk draped the deck, music carried across the water, perfume reached the banks before the vessel did. Ancient writers described the arrival as a spectacle unlike anything the city had seen. She wasn't coming as the accused, she was coming as a queen. Whatever Antony had prepared for, it wasn't that. The alliance they formed reshaped both their futures. Together, they became the dominant force in the eastern Mediterranean. Years passed, children were born, territories changed hands. From Alexandria, it began to look like Cleopatra had actually pulled it off. Egypt still independent, Rome too divided and distracted to move against her. But Rome had another man. Octavian, Julius Caesar's adopted heir, had been underestimated from the start. Many wrote him off early. That turned out to be a mistake. While Antony's attention stayed fixed on the East, Octavian spent those years doing the harder, quieter work, building alliances, and presenting himself as the last true defender of Roman interests. Then he found his angle. Romans were exhausted by civil war. They wouldn't rally behind another Roman enemy, but a foreign threat was a different matter, so Octavian reframed everything. Antony wasn't his rival, Antony was Cleopatra's puppet. The message spread, and it worked. What had looked like another Roman power struggle was becoming something far larger. Antony against Octavian, Alexandria against Rome. And whether Cleopatra fully saw it coming or not, Egypt's fate was now tied entirely to the outcome. The final blow came in 31 BC. Off the western coast of Greece, the fleets of Antony and Cleopatra met Octavian's navy near a place called Actium. On paper, they had every reason to be confident. But wars are not decided on paper. As the battle unfolded, confusion tore through their fleet. Orders broke down. Ships became trapped. And then, in the middle of the fighting, Cleopatra's squadron turned and sailed away. Why she left has never been satisfactorily answered. Some ancient writers said she panicked. Others argued the retreat was planned from the beginning. What happened next is less disputed. Antony abandoned the battle and followed her. His fleet was left behind. Actium was lost, and with it, the war. They returned to Egypt, but some defeats can't be recovered from. The kingdoms that had backed them began switching sides. Allies vanished. Territories slipped away. And as Octavian marched east, the scale of what had happened became impossible to ignore. Rome was coming. The following year, Octavian entered Egypt. The campaign Cleopatra had spent years building collapsed in weeks. Cities surrendered. Defenses gave way. The kingdom that had outlasted empires found itself standing alone. As Octavian closed in on Alexandria, false reports spread through the city. One of them reached Antony, that Cleopatra was dead. Believing he had lost everything, he took his own life. The reports were wrong. Ancient accounts say he was carried to where she had taken refuge and died in her arms. Now only Cleopatra remained. She knew what Octavian wanted, not her death, her surrender. In Rome, victorious generals celebrated with triumphs. Vast public processions through the streets, defeated rulers paraded as trophies before the crowd. Cleopatra had spent decades fighting to keep Egypt sovereign. She had survived civil wars, navigated Roman politics, outlasted men who had tried to destroy her. The thought of ending as a spectacle in someone else's victory march was not something she would accept, so she made one final decision. In August of 30 BC, Cleopatra died inside the tomb where her story had begun. The exact cause has never been confirmed: a snake, poison, or something else entirely. The truth may be gone for good. What followed is simpler. Octavian annexed Egypt. Its wealth passed into Roman hands. The royal line ended, and one of the oldest civilizations in human history entered its final chapter. The pyramids remained, the temples remained, the monuments remained, but the civilization that built them no longer ruled the Nile. Cleopatra is remembered today for romance, for luxury, for the sheer drama of her story. But the drama obscures something larger. She wasn't simply the most famous woman in ancient Egypt. She was the last ruler of a civilization that had endured for more than 3,000 years. And when she died in that tomb in Alexandria, ancient Egypt died with her.